So we begin with a prayer, as we always do, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We ask that the Holy Spirit may come down upon us this evening. We give thanks for all who have gathered here today. We give thanks for the week we've had, and we continue to pray for those who are without electricity, without any support as well. We remember them in our prayers this evening as well. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. And the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker, hugely respected voice in the Irish public life. He has dedicated his career to advocating for human dignity, for justice, and for the rights of the unborn. First elected to the Senator Ciaran in 2007, and actually re-elected yesterday, if I'm correct on that. So congratulations. He's been a steadfast champion of issues related to human rights, family, education, social justice. And beyond his work in the Seanad, he is well known for his contributions as a journalist, lecturer and advocate for faith and Christian values in the public discourse. He's so often the voice of reason in some of our national conversations and the key issues that shape our society today. And politicians are sometimes described as cowboys, that he is certainly the original fast-talking, gun-slinging outlaw of the West. So please give a warm welcome to Senator Ronan Mullen.
Thank you very much, Mark. Hello everybody, good evening to you all. I was afraid about what he was going to continue to say about politicians, because Henry Kissinger, there are many great things said about politicians. Henry Kissinger, who was President Richard Nixon's Secretary of State, once said that 90% of politicians give the other 10% a bad name. I hope the stats aren't quite right. Other people have used, politicians unfairly as kind of comparisons. People say it's crooked as a politician's career. But the worst one I ever heard was somebody who was talking about politics, and they said, politics is show business for ugly people. So I don't know about any of that, but can I just say that I'm honoured to be here this evening at what is a wonderful event. I want to apologise about the fact that I'm going to do something I really hate doing, which is to leave early. I'd love to tell you that I'm on some kind of important, worthwhile business for the public benefit, but I'm not. I'm escaping away. I'm gallivanting in the morning, and I'm on a red-eye flight at 6:30 from Dublin. But I also want to visit my mother, because I haven't seen her since yesterday's result, and as she says, it's like laying an egg, Ronan, or at one point she said, I feel like I've just delivered you all over again, because nobody worries about you like your mother. It often strikes me that and my mother is 80 now, and she's still in fairly good health, but with some challenges, so I kind of want to surprise her this evening by just kind of calling in on the way back to Dublin. So I have to get to Haskra in East Galway and then on to Dublin. But it often strikes me on my birthday, the way a lot of us like other people to remember our birthdays. But the thing we really should be doing is on our birthday ringing our mothers to thank them for giving us life. Isn't that true? So the next time, don't be sulking if somebody doesn't remember your birthday. Just ask yourself, did I ring my mother, or indeed my father? Your father has something to do with it as well, of course, and God the Father has everything to do with it. But don't forget to ring your mother. Don't be so centered on yourself. Ring your mother the next time it's your birthday just to say thanks, okay? Because she was pretty needed in the whole thing, And speaking of needed, what I want to do in what will hopefully be a short talk, and I want to apologise to the other three distinguished speakers that I'm not going to be here to listen to them. I was looking forward to hearing Clodagh. I was amazed to hear that Ciaran is a mixed martial arts practitioner, because I thought Ben Scallon was already one of those, and so I'm kind of, maybe there are two of them. Maybe Clodagh, you do it as well. But I'm definitely not that. I would describe myself more as a kind of a pacifist by physique, Anyway, I want you to talk about that thing about necessary, because I want to start with I want to just give you a couple of quotations that we might reflect on. When Pope Benedict became Pope, and at his inauguration homily, I think it was. He said something like, we're not some collection of chemicals. We're not some, I think the phrasing was, meaningless product of evolution. He said, I think, that each of us was a result of a thought of God. Am I right, Father Charlie? He said something like that. And the phrase I want to lean in on is, he said, each of us is willed, each of us is loved, and each of us is necessary. And I just want you to think with me about that this evening. Each of us is willed, each of us is loved, and each of us is necessary. And I hope you'll see when I finish speaking why I've picked this phrase to start on it, because obviously I'm here to say something about having faith in a faithless world, and as you know, I'm a practitioner of the art of politics. Each of us is willed. We are intended to be here. And if we are willed, there must be a reason why God wills us to be here. Each of us is loved. God has loved us into existence. That is what gives meaning and groundedness to our lives. That is what gives us the strength to weather all storms, and there will be storms. But we are loved. And knowing that and realizing that and internalizing that in our lives gives us strength and gives us the ability to love others. When we look around us today and we look at the cruelties that people inflict on others in many, many ways you don't need me to enumerate, it is not hard to realize that those who cannot show love have quite possibly not experienced love themselves. Because when we are loved, it transforms us. It frees us up to love others. God loved us into existence. This unlocks our power to be fully alive, as St. Irenaeus says, the man, God's glory is man fully alive. We're loved into existence that unlocks our power. Each of us is willed, each of us is loved, each of us is necessary. We have a purpose. Our lives have a purpose. We have business that we are supposed to be about. And for those of us who are Christians, that means that we can't have some kind of private Christian faith that is just about me and God and getting to heaven in a kind of a, without, lacking peripheral vision in our lives. We have a job, which is to get ourselves there and to get others there as well. Because we're willed, we're loved, we're intended to love others and to bring that love of God into the world. And there we are necessary. We have a job and we have a role. And the second quotation I want to give you builds on that. It was John Henry Newman, Saint John Henry Newman, Cardinal Newman, the great convert of the 19th century who brought so many Protestant people back to Catholicism in a Britain that was very hostile and suspicious of Catholicism, and who of course became a cardinal of the church, and who founded the Catholic University in Ireland, in Dublin. He said at one point, God has created me to do him some definite service. He has committed some work to me which he has not committed to another. I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I shall be told it in the next. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. Speaking of God, he says, he has not created me for naught. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace, a preacher of truth in my own place, while not intending it if I do, but keep his commandments. Therefore I will trust him. Whatever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I'm in sickness, my sickness may serve him. In perplexity, my perplexity may serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow may serve him. He does nothing in vain. He knows what he is about. He may take away my friends. He may throw me among strangers. He may make me feel desolate, make my spirit sink, hide my future from me. Still, he knows what he is about. So this idea that we are necessary, there is a plan for us. And it isn't just a plan so that we would be happy. It is a plan that we will also contribute to others' happiness and help them also find happiness through the love of God in their lives. And the interesting thing is that we might have a plan for our lives, and we might think, this is what I have to do now in order to be a saint, which is, somebody once said, the only tragedy is not to be a saint. But so what I have to do is to have a good life. But even then, even when I want to do good and do the will of God, it isn't actually just about my plan. It may be about that, but it's actually about putting myself at the service of God's plan. And that means that sometimes I may not realize what's going on, how it's all working out. Maybe that's why Mother Teresa said, we're not called on to be successful, we're called on to be faithful. So that faithfulness means that we can keep going, we can keep trying, we can keep working on the project, even when we're not feeling that consoling sensation that our work is showing visible success. Those of us involved in the pro-life movement know that we are working for a happier day that perhaps postdates our life on earth in terms of the protection of the unborn again in our society, at least to the extent necessary. We'll chip away at bad law and try and make it better. I sometimes say, I'm in the business of trying to make a worse situation merely bad. You know what I mean? Trying just to make the bad situation a bit better. So remember, we have a job to be doing, but we may not fully know the plan. And finally, my third quotation that I want to offer you is actually from Pope Paul VI, who spoke of politics as one of the highest forms of charity because it seeks the common good. I'm involved in Leinster House in running I started a thing called the Oireachtas Essay Competition. Those of you who have friends or relatives in transition year, 5th year or 6th year are involved in teaching or education might please take note and visit oireachtasessay.ie and encourage friends and loved ones to take part in the competition. The whole idea of it is to get young people to think about politics as something that is a good that they ought to be about, a type of service of the common good, and that they should think of themselves as servants of the common good through finding their place in politics, not necessarily running for election, hopefully not running against me, but it might be canvassing for somebody or some party whose ideas they agree with. Very fine person elected in this county recently for Aontú, Paul Lawless, a wonderful guy, but working for good people, or parties where there are good people in them, and trying to make sometimes the bad situation better. This is important work. We can't afford to have that view just that 90% of politicians give the other 10% a bad name. We've got to get stuck in and through our good influence try and improve that statistic, So we can't afford to be just too self-referential. We've kind of got a job to do here to build up our society again through influencing wherever we can influence. And somebody once said, don't try to influence what you can't influence. Identify what your gift, what your talent is, what your network is. Who can you help be better in addition to yourself? That's the thing we have to be about, is trying to discern our political vocation. What am I meant to be about? And finally, in order to try and achieve that, funnily enough, and this may sound very un-Christian, you have to be very worried about what people think of you. Some people think that the way to be a good Christian is not to give a damn what anybody thinks and just go on and do it. Well, there is a truth in that. But if you want to be effective, you have to care enough about other people in order to find out, what's going on in their hearts and minds and their lives, and how can I be a friend to that person? Not just because I want to take them from A to B, but because they're a child of God. They matter. And if that's the case, you'll choose your words and your deeds and your interventions very carefully. I had this discussion one evening, but I was doing a debate and we were having a photograph afterwards, and it was about 3 or 4 guys standing in the photograph, and I said, no, I think we need one woman at least in this photograph. It looks very male-centered. And one of the guys, good guy, said, Ronan, you know, I thought you're better than all that. You don't have to worry about the appearance of things like that. I said, you have me wrong. I said, I care passionately what people think about me. I'm just not governed by it, I hope, in the key moment. Remember St. Thomas More, not comparing myself for a minute, but in order to save his head, he was willing to have a good look at that oath of allegiance to see could he possibly agree with it. And it was only if he absolutely couldn't that he was willing to be the awkward guy and pay the price. What am I saying? I'm saying that to some degree, you know, to do the Lord's work in our world, we have to be as cunning as serpents, as well as gentle as doves. We have to try to be in some way doctors of the society around us, to spot what's going on, what's bothering people, what's worrying people, why do people lack hope, how can I contribute to them having hope in this situation. I'm far from perfect, that I well know that, and the more you know me, the more you would realise that, but I do have moments in politics where I have encounters with people who just don't agree, but there's still an affection there, how will I put it, because they know there's something behind that they're not against, even if they can't fully opt into it now or yet. That's what we have to be listening for, that opportunity. And it's a phrase attributed to Pope Francis of Assisi. I don't know if he said it, no, St. Francis of Assisi, Pope Francis of Rome, St. Francis of Assisi. I keep getting those two mixed up. But St. Francis of Assisi is supposed to have said, you know, evangelize always, if necessary, use words. So I suppose our job really is to recognise that we're going to mess up spectacularly. But our job is also to recognise that ultimately it's not us who's in charge. And I suppose a good prayer for us all every day is, here I am, Lord, I come to do your will. Well, that's all I have to say. I was told to tell stories. I didn't tell anyway. I'm sorry if I went on too long. Does anybody have a question or want to throw anything at me while I'm here? Father Mark.
Yeah, so if anyone has, we might just take 2 or 3 questions for Senator Mullen. Again, thanks a million for sharing today. Your inspiring words are brilliant, and thanks for being with us. I know you're on a tight schedule. So if anyone has a question now, I will say when we do come to talks like this, and we do say if anyone has a question, please make it a question like, Senator, what is your favourite colour? Something as, because some people take the microphone and they tend to say, well, I'll tell you what I think. If you want to talk next year, give us a shout. Or this is not a question; it's more of a comment. You know, that kind of way. So if you have a question and you want to ask a direct question, we'd be happy to take it. Is there anybody who would like to ask Senator Mullen a question?
I'd like to ask you, Senator, why isn't there a Christian or Catholic party in the Dáil?
Thank you. Great question.
Maybe because there shouldn't be. Because if there was a Christian or a Catholic party, first of all, as soon as they adopted a policy position that somebody didn't like or somebody didn't agree with, or as soon as one of their people did something scandalous, well, it wouldn't reflect very well on the church or on Christ or Christianity. I think what we should try and find are, what we should try and be, those of us who have the love of God in our lives, is to try and be Christian people in whatever party we're in, or if we're independents, and to try and bring Christian ideas to influence whatever we propose. I often say, everything I try and say and do in politics should make sense to the atheist of goodwill, who wants the common good. Of course, Christianity changes what you propose, because if you believe in the loving God, you believe that every human life is sacred, and all the stuff from there is logical. But the idea of Christian parties, I actually think it's possibly counterproductive. I believe in Christian democracy as a political philosophy, but I don't believe in a Christian flag. I think it's just in that sense, because I think it is potentially divisive and has the capacity to lose people. And it also could be interpreted as saying that the Christian party thinks that you are an opponent and are not a Christian. And actually Christians are in the business, or should be in the business, of trying to listen for that potential for common ground. That's my best guess at an honest and decent answer to that. And of course, I could be wrong.
How are you doing? I'm just wondering, what is your role in the politics? Because I'm not too sure, like, because I'm from the north, like,
there are days, many of them, when I'm not too sure either. Very briefly, we've 2 houses of parliament, because laws have to be considered twice before they're passed for signing by the president. We've a Dáil with 174 members elected locally in different constituencies, and they're the most powerful house. They elect the Taoiseach and the ministers, and the government is directly accountable to them. The Seanad is a second house to consider laws before they pass. So we're there to bring a second look, because laws limit people's choices and govern their lives, and the idea is that there'll be better laws if they've been considered twice. That may be true in theory, it's not always true in practice. And sadly, it's a very out-of-date system. There are 60 senators, 11 are nominated directly by the Taoiseach, 43 elected by other politicians, 6 by university graduates, 3 by National University of Ireland, to which I've just been re-elected, and Trinity elects 3. Very good friend of mine, a committed man of faith, Aubrey McCarthy, who some of you may know from his great work with Tiglin Addiction Rehabilitation Centre and a lot of good work for the homeless in Dublin, was elected to the 3rd seat on the Trinity panel earlier today, which is good news, and I look forward to working with him in the Seanad. But sometimes it's just about raising the issues that weren't raised in the Dáil, and sometimes you don't win the vote. In fact, a lot of the time. I often say there's 3 things I try to do in politics. One is change the laws for the better, and I might have massive self-esteem problems if I were to count up the number of times I had any success. It's hard when you're in a minority. It's even hard when you're a backbencher in the government. It's even hard when you're a minister in the government. The second thing is to try and change culture. Little things I try to do in Leinster House. I started that essay competition to try and reach out to younger people and say, think of politics positively. I do a thing called the Human Dignity Award, where we honour somebody every year who has a consistent vision of human dignity. In other words, you don't get it if you're out campaigning for capital punishment or abortion or something like that. But you don't necessarily have to be terribly visible on any one cause. But we have given that to good people doing good things, reaching out to some of the most marginalised in our community, and we do some fundraising on the back of that. I call those kind of my extracurricular activities. They're about trying to influence culture. And sometimes it's just the fact that people, you meet in that parliament and the Oireachtas, and they know your faith, and you hear that they've got maybe a bereavement. You say, listen, I'm going to say a prayer for your late mother, your late father. And you're not pretending that you're holier than anybody else, but you're just saying, I want you to know that that's still real in a lot of people's lives, and it works, that kind of thing, culture. And the last thing is just representing people. I often get people saying, thank you, you said something that wasn't said otherwise. And I know how frustrated I would feel if the ideas and values that I have weren't being spoken up for in the Oireachtas. So it's a great honour for me, even if I'm not always as successful as I'd like to be, I'm not always as good as I should be, but it's an honour to be actually able to represent so many good people, and that's a real blessing in my life. So that's what we try to do. You have a slight northern accent, so I don't want to presume that you're, of the British jurisdiction, but the Seanad is kind of like what the House of Lords is in the British system, Not as powerful, but still there to be heard. Sure, listen, no better to the county.
Will you take one final question?
I'm at your disposal. I'm not running away till you throw me out.
Some lad here, he reckons he's a TD, but I've never seen him before in my life.
I didn't even know you were here.
Firstly, I just want to congratulate you, Senator Mullen. I'm absolutely delighted to have
you've returned, and you've been a great friend over the years, and I'm looking forward to working with you over the next number of years in the Oireachtas. So well done and congratulations, firstly.
Thank you, Paul. Delighted to hear.
And thanks very much for the talk. I was really, really insightful. And I just wanted to ask your opinion, perhaps, on how we get more young people of our persuasion, potentially, to kind of engage more in the public square. Because I think over recent years we have maybe retreated a small bit, and we have ceded ground to, perhaps people that have a different view on worldview than we have. And I look at other parties that have kind of potentially more younger people and growing bases, and how do we, there's a lot of young people here tonight, and it's absolutely fantastic to see. And you made a really important point around, moving the notch, influencing where you can, whether that's putting up a poster or leafleting, or, because, to have our views represented in the public square is so important, because I believe it gives, rise to the proliferation of that, if you know what I mean. So you have been an outstanding voice, particularly, for example, in the family and care referendums. What 2, 3 or 4 TDs and public representatives and senators can do is immense. So how do we kind of incentivize and promote and encourage more young people of our persuasion to kind of get involved and kind of help? Because I believe we have much more public support than potentially, but sorry for taking over the mic, and thanks very much, Senator Ronan.
Well, Paul, at the risk of this sounding like a complete lobbying, I'd say the way we do it is by being a bit more like you. And what I mean by that is, and I hope you don't mind my telling this story, it may or may not be true. It's one of these stories you tell, well, if it's not true, it should be true, And the story I heard about Paul's campaign was that some very well-intentioned person was saying, we need to go on the attack, and we need to take this guy down for something he said or did that. And Paul said, no, we're not doing that. We're keeping the relationships good. We'll focus on our own message and be positive. And when it came to the counting of the votes, Paul got votes from supporters of that person, because he didn't go on the attack negatively. He focused on what was positive. And he also had an eye, probably because he's a Christian, to the importance of good relationships for their own sake. And we've all made the mistake sometimes that we have put the boot in, or we've been a bit judgmental of others. I am constantly judgmental in my own mind, and it's really important to make allowances for people. It's really, really important to make allowances for people. But, good manners and good friendship is good ethics, but it's also good politics. It's a virtuous circle, Your good deeds will return. You might win the election, mind you, but people may be more likely to listen to you when you have something to propose to them. So that's the first thing, to be positive, which I think you were. Second thing is, you're noted for being extremely hard-working. And I know that there's people who have their cataracts sorted out by the hundreds because of your hard work locally. And anybody who's ever tempted to sneer at such bread and butter politics needs to remember that we're all different, and what's important to each person is what's important to each person. And serving others involves serving them in practical ways, as well as serving them by saying big important things about big issues. And I have great respect for the Paul Lawlesses and the Matthew McGraths and people who do what I don't do, which is the hard graft in local constituencies, and still find time to have a vision and a values about big questions that affect the whole of society. And I suppose the third thing, maybe you should have said it was the first thing that you do, that I would recommend, is you didn't wait for the world to be perfect before you got started. You didn't regard it as a kind of a tainted place. We wouldn't have anything to do with politicians, because my mother told me when I was running for politics first in 2006, she said, I thought I told you to wait till I was dead before you got involved in politics. And she kind of meant it. And I think part of it now was, oh, sure, my little darling now, people hate politicians and he's going to be receiving all that negative stuff, But, she kind of got on board very quickly, mind you, because she said, so-and-so now went to UCD, they'll have the vote. Now the other one went to Trinity, they're no good to you, So parents will always get on board. Which is my opportunity to say that if any of you has a degree from anywhere within the state, at any time, from any state-funded third-level college, you are now eligible to have a vote in future Shannon elections. would you please in the coming weeks go on to shannonvoter.ie and check that out, and please get your loved ones to do so. I was fairly hopeful I'd get re-elected this time, but I was worried about massive storm damage to the election register, because a lot of people haven't re-registered. People who were already voting this time won't get their vote. Everybody has to go on to that if they've got a degree. I know it's an out-of-date system, it's not where you'd start, it's very elitist, but it's the ground that's there to be hurled for the moment, and I'm glad to be hurling on it and to be let hurl on it, you know. So be like Paul Lawless, but yeah, that's a really important thing. Don't wait for the world to be perfect before you get stuck in. You know, we've a job to be doing, friends, and it's not we won't all have the same job, but we are actually all called to be political in that best sense. It's one of the ancient Greeks that said that politics is, I think what they said was free men figuring out how to organise society together. And they said men, of course, because women weren't part of the conversation back then. And they said free because, of course, slaves weren't allowed. But the idea is still good, that politics is the business of figuring out together how we do things. And if that isn't the work for Christians, nothing is.
Thanks very much, Senator Mullen, and congratulations.
God bless.
Again. And
come visit Leinster House, we like visitors, you know. I'll do the tour and Paul Lawless will pay for the tea.
it's lovely in the holiday.
No, thank you so much, Senator Mullins. So, no one can deny that proposing Christianity in this day and age can be challenging. However, our next speaker finds his strength not only in the cage, but in his Catholic faith. In a world where belief is often tested, he proves that faith and resilience go hand in hand. So he's here to share his journeys, challenges he's faced, and how he lives that faith with courage and conviction. So please welcome pro MMA fighter, Ciaran Clarke.
Thanks very much, Emma. It's great fun. He's putting up there. I'm second guessing taking another slice of that pizza. I don't want to look at that. So for people that don't know, my name is Ciaran Clarke. I'm actually a Drogheda man, so travel a bit down here now to come down. I'm absolutely delighted to look at all the panel friends. Scallon, a big fan, and of course Senator and Clodagh as well. So thanks very much for having me down. I suppose I'll start with really how, you know, I suppose having faith for me. I think maybe I done one or two of these talks before, and it was like, how did you find your faith? But I actually always had my faith because I was raised Catholic. I was raised by two single women, I mean my mum and my nanny, and I was the eldest of four in the council house. And to be honest, I would be a little bit reluctant to mention that because in the past, because it's I suppose not the nuclear family, but as we know, you know, as we read the Bible, and you know, there's a lot of brokenness, and that's how God worked through us, through the brokenness of us, and that's our humanity, of course. But anyway, you know, like I said, my grandmother had great faith, and we were ready that. It just started from smaller things, like I'd say small things now, but like, you know, going to bed, saying our prayers, or going to mass every Sunday. It created a good relationship for me, my family at the time, and you know, we grew all together. And you know, we didn't have, not that we were poor by any stretch of imagination, but like we didn't have, you know, there wasn't much of a wantonness for material things. We weren't very worldly around like that, and that's again down to our faith, you know. And I suppose then I have to mention, I suppose, because it might be just a question that might be thrown up at me, why mixed martial arts? Why cage fight? Well, I'm going to fight my corner a little bit, because the sports corner, because the sport's under a bit of scrutiny in the last couple of years. Of course, that's down to the individuals, not the sport. But why? Well, like I said, reared by my single mother and my grandmother as well. I kind of had this growing up, and I was the eldest. I had this kind of, you know, conviction or feeling I had to be the man of the house. So, and I associate that with like masculinity and, you know, being the protector. And you know, as a young boy, like, I know that sounds strange, but that was kind of my way of you know, anything happened, like I mentioned, growing up in Drogheda, it's well documented that the feud that happened a couple of years ago. So obviously Drogheda, you know, was a hard place to grow up in those times, but so I kind of had this feeling of that, strange enough. Now as I get older now, I'm 29, and I don't look it, but I realise now being the man in the house is actually, you know, doing your chores or cleaning up after yourself. It's not been like, you know, the protector of what I had in my mind. So, and as well, like, I was always very articulate when I was young and stuff. So when I took up mixed martial arts, I did sports and stuff growing up. That kind of went hand in hand. I was articulate. I could do it in my own way, you know, and especially martial arts. You can do it any type of body. I could take anyone up here now and you could do it. You know, to be a basketball player, you have to be 6 foot, or to be a rugby player, you have to be, you know, obviously all of these attributes are fit. So, and again, to go back to my artistic side, I loved art and I could express myself through that. I never was a team player, or, you know, I was always afraid or shy to get the ball or things like that, you know. But so that's why I kind of gravitated towards that, and I absolutely loved it. I couldn't focus in school. I was always one of the youngest in my class, and, you know, teachers constantly asked me to stay back. So this gave me a focus, and, you know, gave me confidence. And actually now that I realise it was actually Jesus' way of walking through me. It was actually, this sport was to keep me in the straight and narrow. I wasn't tempted by certain things, and you know, like I said, I was born for it. I was born to do that, and that was God's way of walking through me to keep me right. And what I wanted to mention as well, like, again, go back to mixed martial arts. Why that? Well, people say, oh, cage fighting. Well, just to mention, like, the reason why there's a cage involved is because actually it's another art involved there. It's actually for the safety to keep you inside, and it's you know, again, people look at the violence of it, and of course I'm not doing it to be hurting people, or I just appreciate the art of it. And but actually, funny enough, martial arts, especially while I'm a professional, so it's thank God I'm 10-0, I'm undefeated at the minute, and please God may I keep going. But you know, with that comes a lot of sacrifices. And think about it, you all know yourselves, being a Catholic, what is it, or what is love? It's a sacrifice. It's to make the choice to say no to other things. And that actually, it's kind of like if you think of two trains running alongside each other, that is actually the sport. Now, a lot, of course, sport in general, but mixed martial arts, you have to make a weight, so you're fasting a lot. You know, and what Jesus asks us to fast. So a lot of these things is taken, you know, away from you by your own choice. So a lot of these things kind of rang together, and it's suffering, it's physical and mental suffering, but it's a choice. I'm doing it because of I want it. And then again, of course, then I'm going to mention them a lot here. Is you know, we could talk about the technology as well, especially now. I came across Fulton Sheen. I'm too young to even, of course, I'm sure there's probably maybe people here that know about Fulton Sheen. It's probably maybe 50s and 60s on the television in the States. He was a big, you know, evangelist of that time. But he said there's two philosophies in life, and it's the feast and then the hangover, or it's the fast and then the feast. And that's being a Catholic, and that was being in the sport. That was it for me. And it still is. It's, you know, saying no now for the greater good, and that's, like, you know, as well as that, it's carrying your cross now, and what Jesus asks us to carry the cross now. And that for me was my way to find out about that in my own kind of way. I kind of was like, oh, it correlates with that. As I got a bit older, then I started to realise then, you know, learn about the sacraments, and actually learning about, you know, confession, and like growing up and stuff, even like, again, always going to mass, but I always thought like even the Eucharist was a symbol, But actually you realise it's actually the actual blood of Jesus, the actual body and blood of Jesus is up on that altar. When you go, why do we bow? That's actually him up there. That's what I came to realise when I got older, and you know, these things he left for us to use that, and that's what I encourage young people. And people might say, oh, why go to confession? Why would I tell someone else? Well, first of all, Jesus said it to do it. But second of all, you know, they say, oh, well, if God's everywhere, well, why do I have to go to a church? Well, there's water in the atmosphere, but if you want to take a drink, you have to go to the well. So, I mean, and another thing as well, you know, if someone doesn't darken your door, I'm sure you wouldn't be too reluctant, you'd be a bit reluctant to help them. So all of these things is left here by Jesus for us to use, and it's only in the last recent years, you know, and of course, going back even, they left the Ten Commandments, and some people have a bad relationship with the Ten Commandments. It's like, you know, God's telling you not to do that, because he's telling you not to. But he's telling you not to do it because if you don't follow these commandments, you will be unhappy. If you hell on earth for you. And if you want to choose that, like I said, going back to the choice. And, you know, we're all longing for something in life that, you know, that's why people do drugs, and there's this internal longing for us all inherently, that we're all born that way. That's why the animals don't have this, because we have this longing for God. That's our purpose. Go back to Fulton Sheen, he said, you know, a pencil, if it could speak, well, I suppose when it's doing its purpose of writing, it would be in its full contentment. That's Christ on the cross as well. When he's up there, Shia LaBeouf actually said it, you know, Christ in that moment is probably in his greatest happiness, even though in his height of his suffering, that was his faith, that was his destiny, and he's probably in that moment in his greatest glory for us, taking on the sins of the world. And, you know, again, go back to like Fulton Sheen, I'm sorry I keep mentioning him, you know, it's been a big influence on me in my life. You know, we've three inherent things as humans, and what we want, and it's life, truth, and love. And what did Jesus say? He said, I am the way, the life, and the truth. And that's the only three things. What do we want? Life. We want eternal life. We want truth, which is Jesus. He told us who he is. And as well, love, constant. If we're looking around us for everything else, and we're longing for this and that, like I said, that's why people take drugs or look for it elsewhere. You know, they have this longing, but they don't know what it is. And the reason why they don't, and we all, speaking for myself, it doesn't fit our needs, our wants, our desires here. But like I said, it's saying no now for the greater good. You know, and it just, you know, there's great questions there with Paul, like how can we, the young people like myself, or maybe younger, or the generation, but it's, and I love, you know, Father Mark, of course, like at the end of Mass, what did he say? He said, go out and do it by your life. Not what we say about words, or it's how you live your life. So I'd hope to be, and everybody else, we can go out here then, or after Mass, and if we give them the final lesson, we can go out and be the actual example, not by our words. You know, and maybe another thing as well, you know, advice for young people, there's two things that I learned recently, and it was always pretend the person next to your neighbour is Jesus in disguise. You know, and I'm sure you would definitely think about giving the beggar or the homeless person money, or you think about, you know, doing that for the person more if you knew it was for Jesus. And another thing that helped me recently as well, and this was actually own inspiration to myself that was given to me by God, of course, and anything I have in life is from God, of course. To come back to my career and stuff, and I was in tough fights, and not to worries, but, you know, I was getting beaten, you know, bodies, broken noses and concussions, and who did I turn to? And it wasn't God to ask me to win. It was actually God, Jesus, please give me the strength to get through this, to whether it be win or loss, and hopefully we can be in line with His will, you know. And that was it for me. And, you know, come back to what we're saying, and like for me it was an inspiration I got for the young people, is like just saying no 3 times a day, denying yourself. Just maybe once, 2, 3 times. No, okay, no, I won't do that, or, you know, I won't eat the whole packet, I only have 2, right? Things like that, like, so just little things, you know, small little things, and actually, as we're told, that actually alleviates, you know, we can use that to alleviate the you know, the hurt of Jesus under the cross. Use that. You don't just suffer on your own. Like, use that for actual suffering. You know, say I'm doing this for Jesus, and it's funny enough, because when you actually start doing anything, personally, I start realising the rewards I'm getting back, and how better you feel. And again, ultimately, like I said, to come back to, you know, the 3 things we're always looking in life inherently. We're made for God. That's what we are, and when we're not doing anything other than that. And again, I'm not the perfect saint, and I feel a bit of imposter syndrome up here, but of course we're all called to be saints. But you know, that is it. You know, if we can all go out here now and do that, and not just because I said it, of course. And go back to the masculinity thing. You know, I used to think that, you know, it's been tough, and again, like I said, I'm probably an unassuming character. I've been a professional fighter, but you know, for me it was, you know, you go into the monasteries. And that's the most masculine thing you could do, is that these men are being a father and giving up giving their life to God. You know, the oath of celibacy, you know, and that to me is like, you know, it's not physical, it's the spiritual. That's what it is to me, and I suppose that I hope the young people can take that away from here today. And again, like that, you know, there is hope in the world, And like Paul asked, how can we do that? And going back to even the question that man there had about the political, why is there no political parties? But actually these political parties forget the independence of our country. These men, excuse me ignorance, but these men were going to Mass, to be receiving the Eucharist before they went out to die. That's what a lot of people forget. This great faith Ireland had in this country. The massive faith and that we had. These men were dying for the country. And again, of course, they were doing ungodly things as well, but they had great faith. And that's what I would say. These people are forgetting that. And let's hope that we can be that as well here today and as we go out there. And I'll just leave it on this. I don't want to bore you anymore. I did one of these talks before, and Dana was actually one of the guests, and my nanny said, don't bore me anymore, I want to hear Dana sing here. So unfortunately Dana's not here with me, but I'll leave it with this. But Pope John Paul said, and I'm sure there's plenty of people here that might have even seen him all them years ago, but he said, never give up in hope, and pray, and never give up, never. And I suppose to leave it at that is, there is hope out there, and please God, we can all do that by living our lives. So thanks very much.
Ciaran, thank you so much. There's definitely food for thought in that. And if anyone has questions for him, we'll take them at the end. So for our next guest speaker, so often when we hear the word social media, we have immediate negative connotations. But there are some flowers amongst thorns, and our next guest speaker is certainly one of them. So the way that she promotes faith is gentle, sincere and eloquent, and she seems to weave it seamlessly into her personal life, her work for aid to the church in need, and her travels. So next up is Clodagh Gallagher.
Thank you, Emer. I'm honoured to be here. When I saw the lineup, I thought, do they really want me to talk about social media and my job? Like, that's not very interesting. But I suppose to go back to what Senator Mullen had said earlier, we all have our spheres of influence, and I think we'd all kind of agree that my generation have kind of lost the faith. And so I guess that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit. But just to kind of weave in how I even came to faith. So I'm Clodagh, I'm 31, I'm from County Waterford, which is such an underrated part of the country. I could talk to 15 minutes about County Waterford. It's so beautiful. We've got like the mountains, the forest, the beach. It's unbelievable. And that's the backdrop against which I grew up. And I suppose that was really my first encounter with God. I was a bit feral as a child, so I used to go off for hours and hours, and Mam would be like out looking for me in the fields. Where is she gone? And I'd be up trees and in rivers, but I really found great peace in nature, and I still do. And that was really my first encounter with God, supplemented with, I guess, the fact that my grandparents had really great faith. They were my favourite people to hang out with. I used to ask my parents, can I please sleep over at Granny Grandad's this weekend? And they had my own bedroom down there, but I used to prefer to be tucked in between the two of them with like the million rosary beads on the bed. And so I think they were really foundational for my faith. They made the church for me a place of comfort. And I've never really related to people who've had criticism for the church, or people who've grown up and I suppose only experienced the negative things to do with the church. For me, the church was always a place of comfort and a place of warmth. And so because I think of that upbringing, I had a real kind of inner conscience as a child. I would talk to God. I didn't tell my friends that I talked to God, but I would talk to God in my head, and I would be like, what do you think about this? And like, da-di-da, as you do as a child, very innocent. But then when I was 11, going on into 12, I was bullied quite badly. I was in 6th class, to the point where like I didn't talk for months on end. Like, it was really bad, and I'm fine, but we're all good friends again since. But marked me so much as to really transform like my personality, my temperament. I was very happy-go-lucky, as I've described, you know, like prancing around the fields, la la la. And then after that I became very melancholic. Going into secondary school then kept that kind of very melancholic, very depressed kind of temperament. And then you're a teenager and hormones kick in, and like your parents don't know if you're moody because you're a moody teenager or if you're moody because like something else is wrong. So would have been a very moody kind of door slamming kind of teenager, very unhappy. I don't know if anyone else here can relate to that. I don't know if you have any teenagers, but that's the way I was. And very sharp contrast to my siblings, who were just like very happy children. So went through secondary school like that, very insular, would have read a lot, like not very happy with myself, but I wasn't acting out, so I don't think my parents thought that anything was wrong. I think they just thought that, you know, that's who she is. And then I went to college, I went to UCD, and I didn't really have any kind of sense of like hope for my life, or any sense of like, what would you say, any real motivation or drive or interest in like, you know, living really. I was just existing, and looking back I feel sorry for myself, but at the time I didn't think really anything of it, because actually a lot of my friends who didn't have faith, I would have thought that I had faith at the time, little did I know, but a lot of my friends, you know, were living pretty much an identical life to me. We were drinking like way too much and going out all of the time, and it was a really depressing, meaningless life. And not that you can't go out and enjoy yourself, I still go out and enjoy myself, I love a glass of red wine, but it was really empty, and there was nothing really different about my life to my friends' lives. Like my friends would never have gone to Mass on Sundays, whereas I was going home to my parents at the weekends and still going to Mass on Sundays, living kind of like a double life. So I'm 19, I'm actually depressed. I don't realise that I am, but I am actually depressed, and I'm drinking way too much, and spending time with people who really aren't my friends and don't care about me. And then it was around the time of the recession, so maybe this is relatable to some of you here, but like things would have been quite hard for a lot of people economically, and then you're in college and you're like, you're not earning enough money, and so you feel like you're kind of a burden on your family. And I didn't really, that kind of added to it. I didn't really want to share any of that with my family, and so my conscience began to grow really heavy, and I just felt like I was a burden, and I was like too much, and the idea of God became something very distant. It was like kind of not someone omnipresent, but someone who kind of check in now and again, someone very far away, someone who isn't really paying attention to you. And by the grace of God, when I was 19, my granddad, God rest his soul, he was a very holy man, he was obviously praying a lot for me, because he could see like I wasn't really right, and he gave my mother to give to me. This might sound really funny, and I don't really recommend that you repeat this, but it worked for me. He gave my mom a book on purgatory, which maybe you would think that's not the right thing to give someone who's very depressed, like another very depressing book. And it's quite a scary book actually. It's about it's got the imprimatur and the nihil obstat, so it's solid, like you can believe what you read in it, but it's basically a collection of accounts of people who've been visited by souls from purgatory. And my mother gave me this because my granddad had said, you're to give this to her now, this is going to really help her. And Mum was like, it's not going to help her, like this is going to make her worse. But she gave me the book, and I couldn't put it down. I read it 3 times over and over and over, because for me the holy souls in purgatory and their suffering made so much sense. I was suffering, but I didn't feel like I had enough to be suffering for, if that makes sense. Like I felt very privileged and very like there was no real reason for my suffering, so could I just like snap out of it and get over myself? But it was encountering what purgatory is and the mercy of what purgatory is that really helped me. And so I started praying the rosary every day, and I think that was like the beginning of my path to actual conversion. I'd been raised Catholic, praying the rosary, going to Mass, but I didn't really know what any of it meant, and I didn't really I definitely didn't believe that God loved me individually, personally, or was paying attention to me at all, or that I mattered, which I do. And so that was definitely the start. I started praying the rosary every day, and it was definitely like a slow slog. I was still kind of, there'd be days where I couldn't be bothered going to college, or there'd be nights where instead of staying and studying, my friends would be like, would we go out? And I'd be like, yeah. And I'd be gone again. So it was a slow conversion, but it was the fact that I had my mother and my father and my grandparents, and they were just really good people and very gentle with me. And going back to what Senator Ronan said earlier, just to be gentle with people, because you never really know what's going on in their head and in their heart. And I know that if they had been militant with me, or if they had been harsh with me, like, I wouldn't have kept going along this path of praying the rosary and, you know, doing my best. But it wasn't great. Like, I was 19, then going on 20, and I was still kind of like, didn't really have a sense of value for myself or my life. And it was, I was 20, and it was that summer, and I'm working my part-time summer job, like my 40 hours, and I'm loving life because I have that bit of money for the weekend and all of that, and everything that goes with that. And then my mom said to me, Clodagh, would you give up your job just for 1 week and volunteer at this faith camp and look after all of these children? I don't know if any of you are from Munster, but in Munster we have faith camps all along the south coast. It's similar to Camp Veritas in the Midlands, if you know of them, but it's beautiful. And I was like, absolutely not. I am not missing a week of work, a week of paid work. Like, are they going to pay me? And she was like, no, they're not going to pay you. And so we had a big hoo-ha about it, and eventually I agreed to go, because she just said, look, I can see that you're not happy, and you were always such a happy child, and will you please just do this for me? So I went, and I've never looked back. I had the best week of my life. I met other Catholics, people the same age as me, and we became best friends. One of them, she's married now in the US, and she's got 2 babies, and she's very devout. And the other is a Dominican, and the other guy, he just qualified as an accountant, but very, very holy, like very good people. And it was incredible to finally, for the first time in my life, have community and to feel loved. And we had all these priests, and actually this year, for whatever reason, they had brought a ton of seminarians from this seminary somewhere in Italy or something, I don't know, to help out. And I remember, because I'd been reading this book about purgatory all year but had no one really to talk to about it, I remember just hammering them with questions, because I had all these thoughts built up about purgatory and these deep theological questions, and I had no one to ask them to, because I was not asking my parish priest at home, because I would have been mortified to ask him, but I was asking all these seminarians, and maybe I'm the reason they never came back, I don't know, but I was asking them like every evening. So for that week, like after the faith camp, we would all convene at this lady, Margaret Meehan, absolute saint. We'd all go to her house, and there'd be like a feast, and we'd just be eating and playing, I don't know, dodgeball or whatever, and we could be going down to the beach and just chatting about faith and life. And it was as go crack as all my nights out, but it was so real. It was so much more real than any of those nights out. And we weren't afraid to talk about things like purgatory or life and death, or, you know, the meaning of life, and it was so beautiful. And that 1 week just changed my life forever. Like, I've never looked back. And the week after that, Youth 2000 was on. I'd never heard of Youth 2000, but I went, and it was there that I encountered the Eucharist for the first time. And I remember just breaking down, like in a good way. You know, when you have a good cry, like it's a good cathartic cry. So that was in this little hall in Tipperary. It was in Roscrea at the time, the summer festival. So that's like 11 years ago now. And you know, there's been ups and downs, and like growth isn't completely linear, but I'm not depressed. Very, very happy. I wake up every morning excited for my day, and I go to sleep every night very grateful for my life. And I'm never really sad, except if, you know, I have a real reason to be sad. But it's night and day, and I feel like I really am who God created me to be now, in a way that I really wasn't during my teenage years, and I really wouldn't have been if I hadn't encountered Jesus in the Eucharist, and if I hadn't encountered, importantly, Catholic community, people my own age, who had the courage to ask these questions about life and the courage then to live it out. And so eventually that led me to working for Aid to the Church in Need. And I better be careful what I say here, because my colleague David is here, and he could speak about ACN much better than I could, so I might call him up in a minute. But so in 2020 I started working then for Aid to the Church in Need. And if you don't know ACN, you might know our publication, The Mirror. It's something that we send out every month, and it's got a lot of our projects. What we do is we are a pontifical Catholic charity, and we help Christians who are persecuted for their faith around the world. So we have at any one time about 5,500 projects active in 147 countries around the world, and the office in Ireland is just one of 22 offices. And so what we do is anything from rebuilding churches or seminaries that have been bombed because of terrorism, or we are funding catechists to go through catechism training school. There's just a variety. If you go onto our website, acnireland.org, there's so many projects. Some of you maybe support us, but so that's who I work for. But I don't think I was invited here really to speak about ACN. Emer mentioned social media, and initially when she messaged me, I was kind of reluctant to talk about social media, because I just thought, oh, social media, people will just think I'm very vapid and like vain, but that in itself is pride. So I post a lot about my faith on social media, just on Instagram really, and I suppose it's been a very transforming thing to do. I don't see it as a huge big deal, just because all I am really doing is being myself, and you know, my faith is such a huge part of my life. So I post about it, and through that I've had a lot of conversations with those friends that I mentioned earlier who didn't really have faith, about what I believe and why I believe it, and why I'm so different from when we were in college. And they can see a change. They're like, you're night and day. And so some of them have started to come to Mass, and you know, are getting married in the church when they wouldn't otherwise have gotten married in the church, and are baptizing their babies, which is so beautiful. But for me, it's just very simple. I think, you know, Jesus has done so much in my life that why wouldn't I share the goodness of who he is and what he's done? And yeah, it's just, I think that's why I talk about him on Instagram. My friends sometimes message me and they're like, what was that you were talking about? What in the Catechism said the what? And I'm like, oh, it's just, I think you have to be yourself. And I think so many people my age don't feel comfortable being themselves, and by the grace of God I'm now very comfortable with who I am, and so I share that. But yeah, I guess that's just something that I would encourage for any of the young people here. If you're afraid of sharing your faith with people, or if you think they'll judge you, they might, but like what you'll gain in return is far greater. You'll gain an interior freedom, where you have the space to be vulnerable and come up here and tell people your deepest, darkest, and all of that, and it's not going to faze you, because you know that what God has done in your life is so beautiful and is worth telling people about. And so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. But okay, thank you so much.
Thanks a million, Clodagh, for sharing with us there. Yeah, Aid to the Church in Need. They're probably one of only two proper Catholic charities now between them and Mary's Meals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're absolutely excellent charity. We'll have our last speaker, because I know the time is moving on. They might have a small little break for 5 minutes, and then we might open it up for questions then, if that's all right. So it is my pleasure to introduce our last speaker, who has become a prominent voice in Irish media and public discourse as a journalist, commentator and content creator. He is well known for his incisive analysis and commitment to free speech, national identity and democratic values. Through his work with Gript media and his broader contributions to public debate, he has challenged mainstream narratives and provided a platform for alternative perspectives on key social and political issues. His passion for truth, his courage in tackling difficult topics, and his ability to engage audiences with clarity and conviction make him a compelling and most welcome voice in today's one-sided media landscape. His interviews of Irish politicians are a fine blend of prime TV and comedy gold sometimes. So we are delighted to have him with us tonight. So please welcome Mr. Ben Scallon.
I think my interactions with politicians are comedy gold, but probably not for them. I think they have a different opinion on the matter. Thank you so much, Father, for inviting me to speak at this excellent event. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists. Some fantastic contributions there, which I'd certainly like to chase up with you, in particular, Ciaran, afterwards, about discipline and the focus in it. I've already fallen off my New Year's resolution as far as the gym goes, so I might need some tips in that regard. In particular, I wish he was still here, because Ronan made some fantastic points about St. Thomas More, and you'd swear I paid him to say that, because it dovetails perfectly with how I plan to start off my contributions here. I love St. Thomas More. I was baptised in 2019 as an adult, and I took the confirmation name Thomas after that man because of his spectacular contribution to public life. And I'm sure most of us are familiar with his story. The movie A Man for All Seasons is obviously well known, but for those who might not be too familiar, he was an English Catholic statesman from the 1500s. He was a champion of conscience. He, much as Ciaran said, he believed very much in discipline. He used to wear a hair shirt for most of his life. He engaged in self-flagellation as a form of penance. So a humble man, somebody who understood what it took to deny yourself. And I'd just like to read a couple of quotes of what people said about him who knew him during his life. One person said, "Did nature ever invent anything kinder, sweeter, or more harmonious than the character of Thomas More?" The same person said that More was born and designed for friendship. "No one is more open-hearted in making friends or more tenacious in keeping them." And after More's death, people said that he never bore ill intent towards anyone. And yet, as many of us know in this room, More ended his life by having his head cut off by the state. And you think, how could somebody who was so friendly and agreeable and loving end up on the wrong side of the state to such an extent that he would be beheaded? And the answer is, he refused to go along with King Henry VIII's decision to split from the Catholic Church, to get a divorce. More, being a devout Catholic, said, "I'm not going to go along with this." And so he fell afoul of the authorities, and one thing led to another, and it resulted in his eventual demise. But the key point here, in my view, and the reason I love More so much, is before he was executed, he turned to the crowd and he said, "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." And this is such a critical point, because even to the end, he didn't view it as an antagonistic relationship, that he had made himself the enemy of the king and that he wanted the king's destruction. He wasn't calling down curses on the people who were doing this to him. So far as he saw it, he was doing the king a service by trying to steer him away from a terrible decision that would damn his soul and that would destroy the country at large. And so he viewed it as a service that he was doing to the state, even as that same state attacked him. And so, as somebody who is a political journalist, I take great inspiration from this. I have to be absolutely clear at this point in saying I do not embody the values I just outlined. I have plenty of uncharitable thoughts. I am a flawed person. I'm very, very far from a saint and very, very far from Thomas More. But I think it's a roadmap that he laid out there as to how we as citizens or journalists or politicians should view the reigning secular authorities in the states in which we live. Because think about the terrible advice that our political leaders receive in this country and the outcome of that, not just for the country, but for them. You know, over the last several decades, we've become a poorer society in many ways. Of course, on paper, it looks like the exchequer is booming, and we're told there's money to be thrown around like confetti, and yet fundamental things like housing and energy costs have become increasingly unaffordable for the vast majority of people in this country and many of the poorest among us. So whatever wealth is theoretically in the country, it doesn't seem to be actually reaching the pockets of most of the citizenry. So economically, we don't seem to be doing as well as you would think we would if our leaders were receiving good guidance. You think about how we've progressed morally, if you can call that progressing. We're a country that now has tens of thousands of abortions over the last couple of years since the 8th Amendment was repealed. And this was the same government that told us if we repealed the 8th, abortion would become rare. I don't think anybody, when they were casting their vote in favour of rare abortions, envisaged tens of thousands of dead babies within a few short years. The rate of sexually transmitted diseases is through the roof. You have all sorts of moral degradation when it comes to children being confused about their fundamental identity in the school system, all sponsored by the state. So clearly we're not becoming a better or more virtuous people. And even politically, a lot of the time you think, oh well, politicians are just doing what they're doing to get votes. They're amoral mercenaries who just want to benefit themselves politically, and perhaps there's an element of truth to that in some cases. But Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have seen their combined vote shares dramatically decrease over the last several decades. These used to be superpowers, and of course they came out of the election just gone with a majority. They were able to form a government, but their vote share continues to go down with every election. So clearly even they are not benefiting from the policies they're pursuing. It's not going to spell good news for them in the long term. So all of this has to raise the question, what are these people being told by their advisors? They have legions of paid special advisors. Many of these people are receiving hundreds of thousands of euros a year to give expert analysis of how the politicians should proceed, and yet what do they have to show for it? A worse society by almost every measurable metric, including for the politician's own career. So with that said, I feel like my job is to try and be one of the only people in these politicians' lives who will tell them the truth. And I think that's a benefit to them as much as it is to the country, because I was struck last year by then Justice Minister Helen McEntee during an interview. She said that she hears often in the media members of her party anonymously running to the press saying, oh, I'm really unhappy with Minister McEntee's law, let's say the hate speech bill or some other contentious piece of legislation. I don't think Helen's doing a good job, or I don't like what she's doing in this area. But she said during this interview, none of them ever say this to me. I've never once had one of my colleagues come into my office and say, Helen, I don't like the way you're doing things. I just hear about it through the media like everybody else. I hear this anonymous TD allegedly said X, Y, and Z about me. And I thought, how lonely and isolating must that be for the minister? How sad is that you're there and you know your colleagues have all these reservations about what you're doing, but nobody has the integrity or the courage or the compassion to come to you and say, hey, maybe this is a bad idea. And then that all culminates in things like the family and care referendums, where many of our politicians were humiliated because, believe it or not, trying to remove the word woman from the Constitution on International Women's Day and Mother's Day weekend, no less, actually isn't very popular. I find that shocking. I don't know about you, but apparently they needed to be told that in a resounding referendum and have their face smacked with a freshly baked pie to receive that message. So with all of that said, that's why I think my purpose and the purpose of people like me and the purpose of people like us in this room as ordinary citizens should be to try and help our politicians, whether they know that we're helping them or not, and whether they want our help or not. Because as we know, love is not always doing what people want you to do. Sometimes you have to engage in a bit of tough love and tell people the hard truths as Jesus Christ did during his life that might not be the most palatable thing in the world. And so I think this is part of why I find this job so fulfilling, and God in his infinite wisdom, I believe, has a path laid out for me, because when I was, as I say, I'm an adult convert, and several years ago I was discerning whether or not I should go down the route of getting involved in a controversial political media career, because the issues that we're talking about are not exactly the most popular views in the country. We know that most people are not on board with the pro-life worldview, for example, or the Catholic worldview, or many other issues that we discuss. And so I was in Adam and Eve's church in Dublin, and it was 9 o'clock mass, so it was late at night, and I was there and I was praying to God, thinking, what should I do? Is this the right path for me? Should I pursue this? And God doesn't often speak to us, or at least not to me. You hear people saying, I think God is telling me to do this, and I never really understood what that meant, because often he can be a little bit unclear, or maybe we just don't listen. But I'm there praying, and at that moment I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I looked back and there was an older lady there who said, I just wanted to say, I really like that you're a young person, and I can see you're really engrossed in your prayer, and that you really take the faith seriously, and that's such a refreshing thing to see today. So I just wanted to give you this. And she handed me a little card, and it just so happened, I didn't even know this going in, but it happened to be the feast day of St. Oliver Plunkett. And it was a prayer card, and I read the prayer card, and it was a prayer asking God to give the person saying the prayer the courage to be like St. Oliver Plunkett, and to give your life for Ireland, and to engage in a self-sacrificial love of this country for the good of the faith and for the good of the soul of this country, effectively. And I thought, that's about as close to a letter from the man upstairs as you're going to get, and it would be pretty outrageous to ignore something like this. And so that pretty much sealed the deal for me, and I've never looked back. And I think that's been a pivotal moment for me, and all I can do is try my very best to be the good counsellor of our politicians that they probably hate, but that I think they need. And so with that, I would only conclude by saying how important it is to pray for our politicians, pray for the good ones, the bad ones, the ones that we like Senator Mullen, and the ones who absolutely drive us up the wall. Pray for them especially, and love them the way God loves them, even when they make that very, very difficult. So thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant, Ben. That's brilliant. We will take just a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we can have some questions in. If you have a question, maybe someone that you might aim that question at the panel in general, so our 3 speakers, if you have something as well. And again, just please a 1-sentence question, not an essay, or your own comments on it, please. So we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll get back into it. Okay, Emer will do the roving mic. Again, please, if you have a question directed at the panel, if possible, for them all to answer. Again, remembering the topic we're discussing today, faith in a faithless world, maybe their experience, as I say, their experience, strength, or hope, or whatever you have to ask. But please make the question short. Maybe, please, if you can stick to one line, and if it's one of these, my opinion is we'd rather not hear it tonight. Save it for again. Thanks very much. So, whoever has a question, I'll do my best Pat Kenny impression here. Say, gentleman in the blue tie. Mary.
Thank you. I think that it's fair to say that there's been a radical agenda to undermine the faith in politics. What I'm interested in is from the 3 people in the panel, because there's quite a variety of experiences of your own faith, and who informed your faith, how did you learn about your faith, Did you receive any instruction? Was it an example? I think that's really concrete, something important.
Okay, perfect. And again, just for our panelists as well, if you can, I know it might take you could answer that over a few hours, but just to briefly answer as well, so we can move on. So appreciate it.
For me, it was just growing up in a Catholic family, having access to the sacraments, and as I said, like when I was speaking, that it was only later I really found out what it all meant. But being sacramentalized, I think, is huge, because then when you do come back to the faith, it's very simple. You just go to confession. Whereas if you're not sacramentalized, it's a different story. But yeah, just being raised in a Catholic family.
Yeah, exact same as Clodagh there. Reared by my mother and grandmother. I was very Catholic, and just exactly the same. When you get older, that bit older, realising what the sacraments are there and why they're there, that was it for me. And again, like I said, I don't want to go on for hours with my own experiences, but I'll hand it over to Ben.
I'm a convert to the faith, and one of that will be a whole multi-hour thing in and of itself if I was to go over that, so I won't go over that issue in any detail, but just to answer your question, I think I realized that the so-called golden rule that all people believe pretty much the same thing, which is that we should be nice to each other and you should be kind to those around you. That's not really true, or at least it wasn't true until Jesus Christ brought his message of universal brotherly love and fraternity. Because you think about something like the caste system in Hinduism and the idea that karma. A lot of people like the idea of karma. They say, it makes sense to say that if you do something good, good things happen to you, and if you do bad things happen to you. But if you think about the logical extension of that, that means that if somebody is doing poorly, let's say somebody is homeless, they must have done something bad to deserve that, and therefore I don't have to help them. And so, when you think about a society that embraces that worldview, poor people get treated very poorly, and so that's just one example of the ways in which this belief that we all have an inherent value and an inherent worth in the eyes of God is very unique to the Christian belief system. And so I think that realization of how profound what Jesus was saying was, it's very easy to discount Jesus if you think, he was just kind of rehashing what everybody else already believes. That's not true. Jesus is a revolutionary figure, and I wanted to get involved with that revolution.
Thanks. And it's interesting what Claude and Ciaran said about the sacraments as well, because I think it's a bigger debate now whether to take them out of schools or not. And I won't ask you now, but it'd be interesting to hear what you would think of that as well. So, great. You can hang on to Mike for another. Anyone else? Lady with the hand up there. You do a better impression than you have.
Your opinion or your advice on whose decision it is about taking statues and the tabernacle out of hospitals around the country. Is it the HSE that are making that decision? Is it the government that's making that decision? Is it the hospitals themselves? Is there anything that us as lay people can do to lobby it or advocate for it? Change.
Is that for?
I was hoping. Senator Mullen, is he gone?
No, he's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But if you have any advice or anything that you've come across, even in your line of work, as to answers that you might have, maybe.
I think there's a very small subsection of malcontents who are upset with the fact that there might be a crucifix on the wall of a historically Catholic church, and even people who are very liberal atheists don't have a problem with this by and large. And one great example of this is our new health minister, Jennifer Carroll McNeil, who is very liberal, very progressive. She's a self-professed atheist. She said that she has no problem with religious iconography in churches, and that she actually found solace when she was going through a medical issue, or somebody in her family was, I believe, I forget the exact situation, but she was going through a hard time in a hospital, and that she found the fact that there was, a chapel there to be fulfilling in that moment of crisis, as many people do. So if even people like that can see the utility in it, you realize it's a very small, screeching fringe minority, and I don't think most reasonable, sensible people are going to jump out the window because a hospital that was founded probably by Catholic nuns or monks is Catholic in its presentation. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, I pretty much just agree with what Ben said. Of my friends who are not practicing kind of secular, anytime the faith comes up, they really don't have a problem with the faith, they just don't want to be forced to practice it themselves, or they really, I guess, don't see yet that they do need it. So yeah, I agree. I think it is a minority of, as you said, Ben, malcontents who just who have that vocal issue with it.
No, fortunately, no voice. That would be more for Ben, you know, or who to bring that to. But I give you my opinion. It's just like I mentioned in the talk. It's just sad to see the country has forgotten its history and why we are here today because of that, and it's because of our faith. So it's tragic.
Just to exactly what you just said, it's sad that, as you said, if it's a small minority, that so much action has been taken on such a small minority. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Hi, I wanted to thank you all for your talks. They were very good. And I just saw kind of a theme throughout all of them, whether it was about returning to the faith or just the need for us to step up in politics, that there's just a crisis of identity in Ireland, particularly with the young people, regarding patriotism and Catholicism. And so I was just wondering if you could kind of expand on how we can cultivate both of those things simultaneously, whether it's just in something very small and practical, in like whether you've interest in Irish literature that blends Catholicism and patriotism, or a good film. It's just kind of returning to what gives us our roots in those two elements. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's hard. I think we're a nation at war with our history, and people don't really want to admit all of the good that Catholicism has done. They kind of see the faith as something, and I'm speaking really for my friends here, which is what they've told me, is that they see the faith as something for a generation that's gone, and not something that really has any value for them and in their lives, because they get, support from one another, or they get comfort from their lifestyles. But something that I always like to remind them is that they themselves have virtues, and they get annoyed sometimes when I say this, but I say, you have kindness and you have the virtue of patience, and all of that is something that was handed down to you by your parents who were Catholic, and by their parents who were Catholic, and actually the person that you are is a culmination of so many Catholics who lived out their faith, and they don't really like that when I say that, but it is true. And so I think just maybe if we can, in one-to-one conversation with people, remind people of where they come from. But yeah, that's a really hard question, because as I said, I think we are a nation at war with our actual identity. And so yeah, I don't know really how else to answer that.
I think we all have a duty as ourselves, like I said, to be the example. I was a bit reluctant to say this, but I suppose, not to mention it, but the history that has happened in Ireland with the church. Now, I'm going to correlate that with myself, and what I mean by that is, the sport, the nature of sport I do, it's of course violent, and hopefully you don't, after this, maybe look at my sport as maybe some of the actions of the individuals that have participated in my sport, and that's not what it is. That's the individuals, and that goes the same for the church, and that still has its effect on Ireland, unfortunately. But hopefully we, us here, all of you out there, can be good examples for that. And to, I think there's a great duty as well in schools even as well now. The more that these further education schools are coming in, and of course, maybe people are talking about taking church crosses down and statues and stuff. But I know, speaking for myself, my own nephew at home, they still do morning prayers, and morning lunchtime prayers even, and which it is still there. But I think like I said, we can only focus on what we can do, and maybe Ben can say here now that what people in authority can do.
I thought on the issue of patriotism, Ciaran made a fantastic point during his speech, which was about the fact that so many of the rebel heroes, which this country rightly lionizes, were devoutly Catholic individuals who took their faith deadly seriously, even including, we have like a socialist tradition in this country, people like Jim Larkin and so on. Jim Larkin was a passionate Catholic. He was also a Marxist, but he would fight people viciously if they were to argue that he was in somehow not a practicing Catholic. So even the most left-wing among them would have been adherents of the faith. And you think about how interwoven the faith is with the Irish nationalist movement in something as simple as, we often refer to the 1916 Rising, but its other name is the Easter Rising. And it wasn't an accident that they just so happened to pick Easter week as the week that they would launch their rebellion. That was done to symbolize the resurrection of the Irish nation as Jesus Christ rose from the dead. They had the proclamation, and as we've all seen, if you read the proclamation, the opening words of it are, "In the name of God and of the dead generations." And then towards the end of the document, it refers to how they want to invoke God's blessing on their movement so that they don't stoop to inhumanity, that while we're fighting this war, of course, we're going to have to engage in combat, but we don't want to do anything that is unbefitting of a Christian, effectively, and that they were asking God to bless them to prevent them from stooping to that level. And that bookended the proclamation, and that goes back to through all the different rebellions that we have. All of these leaders, many of them were fighting for the Christian faith, and not all of them were Catholic. We know many of them were Protestants, Wolfe Tone, Robert Emmet and these guys, but Christianity at the very least is so inextricably linked with Irishness that if you remove Christianity, you basically have nothing left. It's like sawing a branch that you're sitting on and expecting not to plunge to a disaster. So that I think is the fatal mistake that modern secular people make when they try to jettison Christianity and then they realize there's no substance left to Irish culture. Like, what are we, just a nation of drunks who have we like football? Like, what is there to get passionate about if there's no eternal meaning to it?
Hi guys, look, thank you so much, and I loved what that lady said just before. I was just wondering if there's anything that we could get that would have the statistics on, the real facts about what Catholicism has done for this country, and the statistics on the actual, abuse and all that. I just find like if we don't really know what to say to people when they ask us about the Catholic Church. And I just think it'd be great if we could have something. I don't know if you guys have any suggestions on how we could learn more about our Catholic faith, and even just have to one website almost with these. We need to know more apologetics maybe as Catholics and really know our faith. Any suggestions on that?
Well, I'd just start there to say, as young people, I probably didn't touch on that as much. The technology we have now and the effect of social media, of course, Clodagh mentioned that as well. And I think it's knowing what you believe in. I actually did a talk before, and one of the days was Gerard Brennan. He's the county manager of the Louth football team, and he started off and thought it was brilliant what he actually believes in. And I think that was a big thing for me. Like, why? What do I believe in here? Because I know it's true, so I want to find out everything about it. And I think a good place to start for even young people, just to keep to the team, would be, there's an app free. Maybe it's €2-3 a month, or I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's called Hallow, and I think we've all heard of that. But that has transformed me. There's everything on it, all the information. I've literally went through the Bible when I drive to and from training, listening to the Bible. From there, there's daily rosaries. The stories of the saints, everything. So I think from there, when you know your knowledge, you're equipped for these questions. And I think Joe Rogan said it now, again, he's, to mention Joe, but he said, if you were to ring me up in the morning and say about this, about martial arts or comedy, he said, I could just, in a blink of an eye, a 4 in the morning, tell you about it. I think that's what we need to be at. I'm not at that, certainly not. I'm trying, because, you know, that's what I want to be at, that I can, you know, I'm equipped for these type of things. And yeah, I suppose that's what we can do as ourselves, you know.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. That we have to know our faith, and that can be such a challenge because there's so much to know. Like, I feel like I'm learning every single day. I'll open another book and be like, oh, I didn't know that was part of our faith, and that's something really beautiful. And I think sometimes when my friends ask me, but how can you be Catholic because of XYZ? Sometimes there's great humility in just saying, I don't know. Or this is something personal to me, and when it comes back to kind of like just respecting that you believe what you believe because it's your faith, sometimes they then take a step back and you nearly almost have to remind them, like, I'm not responsible for all of the atrocities in the church. I am just one person. I mentioned in my talk that my experience with the church was very positive growing up, and so it wasn't until I kind of really came back to my faith as an adult that I encountered people blaming me for stuff that happened before I was born. And I still get that now sometimes, and my response is always just to try and have compassion, because I think that it would be such a tragedy if I were to respond to that with any level of aggression or any level of or a refusal to listen or a refusal to understand. Sometimes all people want is for you to listen, and often when I'm out promoting aid to the church in need, I'll get people who'll come up and say, why are you promoting a project of the churches or a charity of the churches? Does the church not have enough money? Have they not done enough damage to the world? Why should we give them any money? They're probably keeping it and whatever. And my response is always just to listen. And in those conversations, when that person finds that I'm not giving them statistics or pushing back or arguing when I'm just listening, what I'm doing then is facilitating space for conversation, and I'm getting to the why of why they feel the way they feel, and usually it's because they've been hurt. And so the answer then is not for me to give them an answer, it's just to be there for them and be an active witness in that moment of Christian compassion and mercy, and hopefully they walk away from that and they think, oh, I met a practicing Catholic and they weren't the worst person in the world. And sometimes that's all we can do, and we just entrust it to the Holy Spirit, and He will do the rest, because it's not our job to convert people and save souls. That's His job. All we have to do is a little bit that we have to do, and that's all.
I think those are all excellent points, and in addition, I would say, without minimizing terrible things that have been done at the hands of members of the church hierarchy, of course, which were horrific, I also think politicians have done a lot of bad things over the years. That doesn't make me any less proud to be Irish. I believe that the Irish nation is bigger than individual poor leaders who we've had over the years. My entire perception of my Irish identity does not hinge upon this particular Taoiseach or this particular president or this particular minister. And in the same way, an institution as ancient as the Catholic Church, which has been around for 2,000 years, is so much bigger than a bad leader or a group of bad leaders that may exist in one period of time in one geographical location. So that doesn't mean what happened isn't very serious and awful, obviously, but it is just to say that I don't think it's reasonable to try and zero in on a very, very small section of the church's history, given the thousands of years of wonderful charitable contributions that institution has given to the world. And I would also say, anybody who's surprised and shocked by the fact that Catholics and even Catholic leaders do bad things is not familiar with the Christian faith, because the very first book of the Bible starts with a story about humanity doing the wrong thing and blatantly disobeying God and bringing destruction and disaster on itself. And even the New Testament begins with all of the apostles abandoning Jesus, with the exception of one. The first pope engaged in cowardice. He proved himself a liar. He said, "I'll never abandon you," and then he did just that. One of his apostles betrayed him. So my point is, it started with disaster. It's been a disaster since day one. The idea that there was this perfect, unblemished record that was then suddenly ruined by a handful of bad clergymen in the last century is just not accurate. So we should expect these kinds of things in any kind of institution that's comprised of human beings, but that doesn't mean that the entire church is worthless or that it doesn't have something beautiful to contribute to the world. That would be my response to that particular issue. But thank you so much for the question.
It's 9:30 now, so I'll take one final question if you have a burning desire for the best question of the night. If you feel you have it. No pressure, no.
No takers. Oh.
How you doing? It's not a question, it's just an idea.
It has to be a question, not a comment, if that's okay, because you have to keep it strict tonight, if that's okay. If you have a question, ask.
I just want to ask, what is your favourite prayer for each of the panellists and why?
That's a nice one to finish up on.
I've recently, I don't know if it counts as one prayer, but I've recently, well, in the last year, every day I pray the hours, like the office of the church. So I'll do my morning prayer, evening prayer, and night prayer. Maybe that's cheating because that's 3 prayers, but it really sets me up for my day, and it's like a little rhythm, a little pattern throughout the day, and I'm connected to the rest of the church in that. And I find it's a really good way to get scripture in. Because then God is speaking directly to me, and I love it. I find so much joy and so much beauty in it. So the office of the church.
I would say it's the rosary for me. I have rosaries in the van, and I can say it on the way down or driving or anywhere. And it'd be a big thing I'd rely on a lot, to be honest. And I think actually, I'm not sure who mentioned it here. I could have been full screen again, but I think all of the senses are working while you're doing it. Your speech, physical, and as well, your eyes as well. So I think it's a very powerful tool, and again, that's why Our Lady was giving us, look where we are. I think I nearly kind of forget where I am here now. That's, even talking about the history of the church and of Ireland. She chose to come here. She's given this, and it's a powerful weapon. So for me, that was a big thing for me, and I've often brought into the cage with me and stuff, and it's a powerful weapon,
I personally love the litany of humility, which I think some people will be familiar with, and it's the kind of thing that, because of, I'm not going to say in general because of people's pride, because I don't know, I could be talking to a room full of saints, but for my pride particularly, it strikes at the core. It lets you identify the areas in which you have pride that you don't even realize necessarily, because you're praying for things like, as people will know who know the prayer, God, that I can decrease in the eyes of the world, and that other people will increase. Give me the grace to desire it, or asking God to give you the grace that you don't fear being falsely accused of something, that you are happy to accept whatever false accusations or smears the world wants to throw at you. Obviously, you can imagine how somebody who is in a combative political arena would think about such things a lot. I find that the litany of humility really, I would still struggle with issues like that, as I think we all do, but it helps you to realize how you should be thinking if you are aiming to achieve sainthood in this life, which is, of course, all of our vocation.
That is it, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it at that. We have to be strict on time because we have to be out of here by 10 o'clock, and I'm sure people want to chat and mingle for a little bit. I just a huge thanks to Knock for having us this evening, and for all they've done for Geraldine there and all the staff as well, for having this up and running. Thanks to you guys for coming and for spreading the word about this event as well. It takes you to do that as well. Again, church looking for money. These things don't come for free, so there is a donation box down there, free admission, but if you'd like to put a few pound in and help contribute towards it as well, we'd appreciate that. I want to thank the team that made this happen. Emer and Martin Dunn is there as well, so thanks for your help as well. Martin's hiding there, he doesn't make any public appearances, so he's hiding away there. And Emer Burke as well, really appreciate it. And most of all, to thank our guests tonight as well, for they've all travelled really from the East Coast. Even Ronan travelled as well down. He's heading away on holiday this morning, so we really appreciate you being here. We wish you the best in your careers, and we really appreciate the time that you've given us today as well. So thank you, Ben, Ciaran and Clodagh, and obviously Ronan as well. So give them another round of applause. Again, we thank you all again, and thanks for coming out, and the Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you now on your safe journey home, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you. Thanks very much.